And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. If you guys are new to us on the Amazon platform, welcome. Make sure you guys hit that follow button so you can stay connected with all of our programming here. You'll see it either here in this corner or down below. You also will see the fourth book by our next guest. We're excited to welcome Rodney Hurst, the senior, to our broadcast today. He's the author of the book you guys see here, Black and Brilliant, a great read for young readers, but also for us adults as well. We're going to talk to Rodney not only about the writing of the book, but also what it's going to take for him to share the history as well. We are simulcasting our broadcast today, so we also welcome those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, as well as X as well. Rodney, thank you again for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Cyrus.
Well, Rodney, I think that the great thing about this book is, as I mentioned in my intro, there's the history, but also there is the empowerment factor of this book as well. That's been a big part of your platform. As I mentioned, this is your fourth book. What has it been like for you to see the response to Black and Brilliant?
Well, it's been gratifying when you understand this toxic atmosphere we're in the state of Florida, where the governor and others in elected authority in Tallahassee have deemed it necessary not to teach Black history and to ban Black books. So it's toxic for education. It's toxic for young Blacks to understand their legacy and the Black and brilliance of folk who look like them, who have done things in American history. They're doing things in American history that makes white folk feel guilty and uncomfortable. But that guilt and that uncomfortableness has nothing to do with them doing what they did on day-to-day basis. It has a lot to do with how white folk treated them and how they responded and what they were able to do as a result. When I started school when I was 5 and I got skipped. So I'm 11 years old in 8th grade. And I met Rutledge Pearson, who was my 8th grade American history teacher. That was 69 years ago. And he taught us about American history, not the history that was approved for Negro students in a Negro classroom, in a Negro school in the Negro division of Duval County, but in such a way that we understood the great legacy of Blacks who had made a difference in this country. He would say to us, if you're not a part of the solution, then you are part of the problem. He encouraged us to join the Youth Council, NAACP, which I did at age 11. He was the advisor. So our youth council meetings were extension of his American history class, but what we were able to learn and what we were taught in his class were the great and relevant and salient contributions of Black folk, where that segregated and racist American history textbook did not teach that. So young Blacks today, because they don't get that menu that they can choose from, they don't get that diet of good food. They get a bland and tasteless diet of baby food, of pablum, as opposed to really understanding what Blacks have done in this country. We don't owe white folk anything, and no one has done any favors for us. So Black and Brilliant says to young Blacks, understand the legacy of your greatness and the legacy of those folk whose shoulders you are standing on, who did great things in American history.
And Rodney, what you were talking, I thought about, again, you brought up something really interesting, that you were taught history. I think a lot of times there's two things happening, right? There is, of course, some history not being taught, but also some of us have not gone out to look for the truth in history too. Do you think you're being taught that history help you to appreciate the importance of learning more? So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, it's important what we're learning in the classroom, but also it's important what we spend our time individually to be able to learn and to appreciate, right?
It changed my life. even at age 11. The first book report that I did as an 11-year-old in 8th grade was The Slave Who Freed Haiti, which was about Toussaint Louverture. So you can imagine how I felt with the first time I went to the museum, Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. In the basement, I saw a statue of Toussaint Louverture. So that made my entire trip. The only formerly enslaved person to lead a slave revolt in this hemisphere. And of course, what it also taught me in his class, and after reading that book, and I had never heard the name Toussaint Louverture, and even today we don't hear about the father of Haiti and what he was, how his history is inextricably bound to the history of this country. So you have to have that curiosity as, what else are they not teaching us? What else do we not know? And the more you get involved in American history and the contributions of folk who look like me, the more you are amazed at how in history Black folk were able to do some things in spite of being marginalized and in spite of the other obstacles in their way. And young Blacks need to understand that, because they're not taught. And I guess it was kind of folly that we thought the oppressor would teach our history. It is our responsibility to teach it. Our churches and our fraternities and our sororities and our social organizations, we have not been doing that. So we have a responsibility to teach young Blacks so that they will understand that no one gave them anything, even notwithstanding what's not included in the books. And they need to be proud of who they are and the legacy of their Black history.
One of the individuals, you and I were talking earlier about the NAACP. And when you were just talking, it reminded me of what you wrote in the book about someone I didn't know anything about, Roy Wilkins, before reading this book. Yeah. I want to talk about that because for those who don't know, when you pick up Black and Brilliant, Rodney's not only able to share history, it's his own journey through history as well, and appreciation for individuals who paved the way. Talk to us about the impact of Roy Wilkins, Rodney, and what it was like for you to chronicle that in the book.
Well, after I was president of the Youth Council NAACP at age 15 and led the sit-in demonstrations in Jacksonville at age 16. And after we had sat in for 2 weeks, we were attacked by 200 whites with axe handles and baseball bats after the Klan had given out free axe handles in downtown Jacksonville. A few weeks later, I was invited to Virginia, to the Virginia State Conference of Branches. So their large meeting, their concluding meeting, was going to be at the Richmond Mosque at that time. And the key speaker was Roy Wilkins. So before Roy started speaking, after he was introduced, he said, young Rodney Hurst, come up and tell the people in Richmond about the axe handle story. And I came up and I spoke for about 10 minutes and I told him about what happened. And I sat down and I had just a rousing applause, which really made me feel good at age 16. Mm-hmm. So he told me, he said, that's the last time I'm going to let you speak before me. So we laughed about that. 3 months later, we invited Roy, Mr. Wilkins, who was the executive secretary, which is now president, executive director of the NAACP, to speak at one of our mass meetings. Mass meetings for NAACP was how we got the word out, because we didn't have Black reporters other than the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, the Amsterdam News, and some of the local Black weeklies. So the mass meetings that we held in churches, because they were the largest venues that we could get the word out about what was happening. And we were now boycotting downtown Jacksonville and the newspaper, which blacked out all news about the sit-ins. So Roy was the speaker, and when he got up to speak, I was presiding. He said he was only going to speak if I did not speak before him, and he went on to recount what happened in Richmond. So he was a great person. Another side story, after Axe Handle Saturday, I was invited to go to Mississippi to speak. And even during these times, even though we could not trust the FBI, we could not trust the police departments. So we had to have, we NAACP had to have a security force, security guard to protect Blacks who came into town to speak at these mass meetings. So Ruby Hurley, who was the Southeastern Regional Director after Axe Handle Saturday, came to Jacksonville and ran the regional office from Jacksonville. So when she called Mr. Wilkins and said Rodney was invited to Mississippi to speak, a couple of days later, he called Mrs. Hurley back and said, Ruby, we can't let Rodney go to Mississippi because we cannot protect him. I was invited by Vernon Dahmer, who was the state president of the NAACP, and also Med Gavers. And of course, Mr. Dahmer was killed a year or so later when the Klan firebombed his home, and then Med Gavers was killed 3 years later. But that was what the movement was all about. And Roy Wilkins, as the executive secretary of the NAACP, was in charge of this multi-leveled organization that had both local, state, youth councils, and college chapters and adult, in addition to adult branches throughout the country.
That's powerful. I want to say, for those who are just tuning in, welcome. You're watching Cyrus Webb Presents. We're excited to welcome best-selling author Rodney L. Hurst Sr. to our broadcast today. He's the author of a few books, the fourth book being this one you see here, Black and Brilliant. For those joining us on the Amazon side, we have it highlighted for you guys. You will also see other books from him as well there in the carousel on the Amazon side. For those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and X, you'll find a link that will bring you over to Amazon so you can be able to get the books for yourself. As you were just talking, Rodney, I want to talk about where we are present day, because young people are very active today. It seems like young people are really trying to take the lead, and when it comes to being able to make a difference and to make sure that things are moving forward. What is it like for you to see how some young people are following the examples of individuals like yourself and trying to do their part to make society better?
Well, when I talk to young people, when I talk to college students, graduate students, and I talk about the Black history and the civil rights history they've never heard of, and I always tell young people, keep your tablets and your laptops and your iPhones open, because I'm going to say some things to you that you have not heard before. I'm going to talk about some individuals whose names you've never heard before. They get angry because all through their public school years and into their college years, they have not heard about some of these folks. Yeah. About Daniel Hale Williams and Charles Drew and Matt Henson and Garrett Morgan and just a group of Black folk, just on and on. And then they have not heard about some folk who they thought were white. Alexander Dumas, who wrote The Three Musketeers and The Count of Monte Cristo, and Alexander Pushkin, who was the father of Russian literature, and Queen Charlotte, who was the great-great-great-grandmother of the recently deceased Queen Elizabeth of England, and Hannibal the Great. All of these folk were Black, and none of that is taught in school. So when you whet their appetite about the legacy of Black history, when you talk about Thurgood Marshall, when you talk about Roy Wilkins, when you talk about A. Philip Randolph, when you talk about the great women in American history, from Mary McLeod Bethune to Ella Baker to Ruby Hurley to Ruby Bridges to Henrietta Lacks, they've never heard of these people before. And of course, it's not surprising, it is not surprising now that white textbook authors, white racist historians don't include in these textbooks the information that they need to include about Black folk. And we shouldn't expect them to, because white folk are not going to tell our history the way we should tell it. and the way it should be taught. So we don't have it in the textbooks and in the educational arena. They tell you that if it's not written down, it did not happen. So white folk and black folk go into a classroom, white student opens up a history book, a math book, a literature book, and read about the contributions of those who look like them. And we don't read about anything about those who look like us. And the playing field is not level. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to level that playing field so young blacks can understand that nobody gave them anything, that black folk earned everything that they got in this country.
You say in the book, and it really does say a lot about your humility and your place in history yourself. Rodney, you write this for those who have the hardcover edition on page 94. You start off by saying black and brilliant are not words to say with no meaning. But then you go on to say, we never looked at ourselves as pioneers. We were a part of the solution by fighting the effects and the indignities of racism. It was never about me and I. It was always about we and us. And then you go on to say, we were no different from you. What do you want young people to know, not only about what's possible for them when it comes to making a difference, but also about the role they can play in change?
Look around us right now. At one point in time, they said in the NFL, even before they integrated the NFL, that blacks would never be quarterbacks because they did not have the mental capacities to run a complicated offensive scheme and to know where different offensive players would be. And yet now we've got Hurst and we've got Patrick Mahomes and we've got Kyler Murray and we've got Kaepernick, even though he was treated the way racists would treat a black person who steps out, but that's another conversation. There was the word that black females could never be gymnasts because there is this body type that their bodies are not suited for because they have additional layers of fat in their body and they could never do the things that gymnasts are supposed to do. Simone Biles never got that memo. Black females cannot swim because of the same reasons. Simone Emanuel never got that memo. Blacks are not supposed to be able to play tennis and play golf. Well, the Williams sisters and Tiger Woods never got those memos. These are black and brilliant folk who have achieved in spite of. There was an article where Reggie Jackson talked about how he was treated in Birmingham as they returned to Birmingham based on the civil rights movement. And of course, Birmingham at one point was called Birmingham. When blacks went through these circumstances and they achieved in spite of, and the marginalization of black folk, those stories need to be told. How he slept on the sofas of his teammates because he could not stay in the same hotels, and Charlie Finley would not allow them to not stay at the same place. So these are black and brilliant circumstances, individuals and persons that we take for granted because no one makes a big deal about them. And it should be a big deal because these are pioneers who are blazing a path for other blacks to come behind them. And especially with Simone Biles, now I'm seeing more black girls involved in gymnastics than I've ever seen before. That's because of what she was able to do, and those Gabby Douglas and others who preceded her. So we have to understand that black and brilliance. We have to start talking about it. We have to, instead of us having social gatherings all the time like we do with social clubs and fraternities and sororities, we've got to start talking about black history. If it's nothing more than a nugget a day, we need to let young blacks understand in this toxic atmosphere, not only in the state of Florida, but in this country, that black folk have done things this country would not have developed without the inclusion of Black folk, even though we were kidnapped and brought over in the bowels of slave ships. And we've got to be able to say that and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, it's a powerful conversation. It's a great book, Rodney, and I'm so glad we had you on to be able to talk about it. Congratulations on all of the accolades it is getting. Again, everyone, Rodney L. Hurst Sr. has been our guest. Black and Brilliant is his fourth book. It's being recognized right now by reader views. So glad we had a chance to talk about it. You guys can get it here on the Amazon side of our platform as well. So make sure you guys take advantage of that. Rodney, you have a website as well. Let them know how to stay connected with you.
Yeah, my website is Rodney Hurst, RODNEYHURST.com. And let me also, in addition to reader views, the book has also gotten 3 other national awards. And thank you for recognizing the book also, Cyrus. It's an honor to be recognized by you and your team.
Well, it's our pleasure. Dr. Bam is joining us on the West Coast. She says, powerful. Dr. Bam, I think you're gonna really enjoy this one. We're going to be tagging Rodney over on the Facebook side as well, so you guys can stay connected with him. Rodney, I know we have a great conversation. It's so funny. I don't know if you know this or not. We're actually, when we have our radio interview coming up, I'm on the radio here in Mississippi. That's home for me. That's where I am now.
Wow.
so you'll be on the radio dial with me later this week.
One of my good friends is Charlie Cobb, who was involved in Freedom Summer in Mississippi in 1964. And in my second book, Unless We Tell It, It Never Gets Told, I do a chapter on him and his involvement and how he got involved with SNCC and in Mississippi. These are, I wasn't saying Black and Brilliant then, but everyone that I write about in that second book, which is about Black history, starting with James Weldon Johnson and going through A. Philip Randolph and Charlie, these are Black and brilliant Black folk who represented the conscience of this country. And a lot of things would not have happened had they not come on the scene and made a commitment to do what they did.
Yeah. Hello to you, Tina, joining us from Texas. And we do have your book, Unless We Tell It. We have it in the carousel on the Amazon side, too, so you all can be able to get it as well. Rodney, I really did enjoy this conversation. I'll be posting my review here on Amazon. Invite anyone else who's already read the book to make sure you guys are doing that. And Rodney will be speaking soon.
Look forward to it, Cyrus, and thank you. It was an honor to be on your show, and the pleasure was certainly all mine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we definitely thank you, our audience, for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. If you guys came in late, don't worry. The replay will be here on Amazon. Also, if you guys are joining us on the simulcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or X, the podcast will be there as well. Until next time, I'm Cyrus Webb saying thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk to you all soon. Take care.